Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for the Mindful Eye and the photo of the week on the Daily Critique. This week's photo of the week was created by Ed, who is an intermediate photographer from Florida. Metadata, Pentax K5, f4 300mm lens. After the crop factor, this is effectively about 450 millimeters. Very long telephoto. I want to talk more about that in just a second. ISO 1250 f8 and 1/400th of a second. Ed's backstory: he says he went to a national wildlife reserve to shoot wildlife, but wildlife was scarce. He switched to his macro lens, started to notice a lot of insects, and near the end of the day went back to his 300mm telephoto, revisited a butterfly flower garden, and made this image. Wanted to mention the lens here. It's pretty easy to imagine that Ed's macro might be a classic focal length for macro, 100mm or 180mm. So pretty safe to assume that switching back to the telephoto here would push Ed much further back from a working distance standpoint, and that could really be helpful here with a potentially very skittish subject. Could be the difference working with a macro, going to the extreme effective telephoto here of having a subject or not. The other thing that backing up is doing is it's affecting perspective and potentially simplifying this shot by taking all parts of the butterfly and this flower and now backed up. All of these things, the wing, the different leaves, the flowers, start to become more and more the same relative distance from the lens, which would simplify this part of the shot. Could do the same thing with the backgrounds. Just really wanted to mention this idea. Working distance and perspective, two very powerful concepts when it comes to lens choice, and really encourage you when you have the opportunity, particularly when you're working with zooms, to see how working distance and perspective is being affected. Find something you want to shoot, come in pretty close with a wider lens, and then try to affect the same composition by backing up. I really think the telephoto is having a huge effect on the fact that this shot is working such a beautiful way. In addition to perspective being simplified by backing up and shooting with a longer lens, depth of field is also helping to simplify, create simple emphasis on the main subject, sharp, and a lot of the parts of our main subjects in here, flower and plant, and definitely a big fall off of focus on the background. Another thing that's helping to simplify here is value. Just asking yourself the question, how are you managing one of the most basic elements of design, value, difference in relative bright and dark? Clearly the main subject is a butterfly, and overall it's very dark relative to a much lighter background. Quality of light here really beautiful relative to subject matter. So much of the time when we want to come in and get very close, shoot intimate details of nature, having a simple lighting pattern so that real harsh highlights and shadows, a complicated lighting pattern, are not competing with what can already be an enormous amount of information. So I love the soft, even lighting here. I love the way it's creating this beautiful catch light on the eye of the butterfly. Continuing to talk about value, another thing I love about this shot is how it moves from light at the top to dark at the bottom. I like the way this dark base is helping to anchor the image. There's quite a bit of movement that could take us in this direction in the image, just implied energy that's pushing down just from the main subjects, the way that they're angled. And I like the way this darker base is helping to create a foundation for all of that implied energy. One of the things I talk about all the time is rhythm. And one thing that you can do to help you to see the underlying structure of an image is to make it really small on your screen. Just get back from it so that you can start to just see more of the intrinsic form and shapes and relationships. It's a real powerful thing to do in all of your creativity, to just change your perspective to the point where you start to see something in a much less literal way. When you make this image really small, you see how powerful the rhythm is in this image. And we can just quick point out all kinds of shapes that are rhyming. When you look at the structure of the butterfly, start to look at some of the subtle ideas that are being expressed in the background. When you look at positive space shape and then negative space shape, you just see these negative space shapes carved out over here. The same very dynamic kind of carving out of negative space is happening, but in a much bigger way here. This implied shape out of focus in the background is rhyming not only the wings of the butterfly, but also the leaves. It just goes on and on and on. You can keep finding it. In addition to the powerful unifying effect of rhythm, you also have a real strong sense of the major diagonals being implied in this image, and that can help to have a big unifying effect. Another thing that I like is that there's also quite a bit of dynamic tension There are all kinds of ways that we could talk about that. One is just the straight up and down here of the plant, but then the real strong diagonal energy of the butterfly, and then also of the flowers. There's also a really beautiful sense of the dynamic when you look at the way this line cuts the frame. On one side it creates this real strong stabilizing square with a subject almost right in the middle. On the other side it creates a very dynamic shape, a panoramic shape. Love that. It's really powerful. Color is one of my favorite elements of design, and I talk a lot about becoming more aware of color relationships as a way to keep color, which is very complicated, from overwhelming the other elements of design in your composition. There's a really beautiful bit of color design here that I think can be really powerful when you can find it and then also work with it in your post-processing. That's two pairs of exact complementary colors or near complementary colors. From the painter's color wheel, red and green. From the printer's color wheel, blue and yellow. Love that. The other thing that I love is just add story. It's getting there and not having what you sort of expected, and then switching to the macro lens, and that helps you to see on a different level, but then going back at the end of the shoot to the telephoto and kind of marrying two concepts. Your original technical idea about equipment with things that you've seen because you've accepted the fact that the wildlife aren't there, and you're starting to look for smaller things, then using your original lens choice, fantastic choice, to create this shot. And tenacity and hard work are just 90% of it. We just have to really love what we're doing and be passionate and stick with it. And I love that part of the story. A really beautiful image, so many different levels. There's a lot of other things that we could talk about, but hopefully a lot of things I've already talked about could help you in your own photography. Would love to get your images that you think are your favorite images, your best images, submitted for the photo of the week. Would also particularly love it if they were scenic or landscape shots. Would like to see more of those types of submissions. Big thank you to Ed. Big thank you to you for being here. Hope to see you again very soon on The Mindful Eye.